In all of the top goal setting videos, creators talk about setting systems, not goals. And I think this is really good advice because systems are ultimately what's going to get you to creating long-term consistent action and achieving your goals. But I think there's a really crucial piece of the puzzle that's missing, and that is the identity shift. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how to create goals that you genuinely want to stick to and allow you to create meaningful change in your life on easy mode rather than on hard mode. I'm going to walk you through the reason that goals don't stick for most people, the 4 components of the identity shift equation, and the 90-day goal setting method that I use every single season of the year to create goals that really work for me. If you're new to my channel, I'm Lucy, I'm 24 and I live in London, and this channel is all about how we can turn our dream lives into our real lives through tangible action and mindset shifts that make it way easier for us to do so. So let's get into it. The first thing I want to talk about is why goals don't stick for people and why the goals that we're setting, particularly around New Year's, the sort of New Year's resolutions that you typically hear about, why they're not really going to create any long-term lasting change. So around 54% of people who set a New Year's resolution don't follow through on them.
Some studies are way higher, up to 92% on this.
And I really don't think that in the majority of cases that's because someone is unmotivated or because they're lazy or that they don't want to change. It's just that you're approaching it in the wrong way to actually create that lasting change. So if we take a look at some of the common resolutions, it's things like exercise more, lose weight, travel more, learn a new skill. And while all of those can be really good things to want to do, I think that by setting it in that sort of framework, you're approaching it from a place of not enoughness, and that creates really shaky foundations to actually build from and create meaningful change. I think there are 3 main problems with resolutions like this and why they're not effective goals. The first one is that there's no action attached to it. Travel more is very vague and non-specific. The second one is that there's no sense of completion. How do you know when you've travelled more? How do you know when you've completed that goal? And thirdly, there's no connection, no personal feeling attached to why you're doing it. They're often centred around other people's ideals and other people's sort of expectations or standards, and it's quite hard to feel a strong pull or connection towards that because it doesn't necessarily feel personal. So instead, I think that the key thing, as I mentioned at the start, that any goal needs is some kind of sense of identity shift. Sure, systems are great and systems are going to help you to create that tangible action to move closer to where you want to be, but the identity shift is actually really what we're after here. And I'm going to walk you through my identity shift equation, which sort of comes along with this train analogy. And so the first thing in this train analogy, any journey that you take, you need a destination. You would never have a train that is just moving along the tracks with no specific end destination in mind. And so I don't think it really makes sense to set goals with this sort of vague intention behind them. I think you need to be quite specific about what you're setting out to achieve. And I just want to caveat that the destination can shift. You might set out in one direction towards, say, Nottingham on the train, and you might get halfway there and think, actually, no, I want to go to Manchester. I don't want to go to Nottingham, I want to go to Manchester. And that's absolutely fine. You can hop off the train, you can get on a different one, and you can realign with where you want to go. But I think that if you don't have a destination in mind to begin with, you're just setting yourself up for confusion, for slower decision making, and that just slows the whole process down because you're having to constantly reevaluate and remind yourself why you're even doing it. If you've got a destination, it's way more easy to create meaningful results because you've got that momentum. Another way to think about this, if I take us out of the train analogy for a minute, is the way the airlines sell flights. They don't sell you the flight itself, even though that is what they're selling. The way they market it is around the destination. It's around the place that you're going to and the sort of identity that you're going to have when you're there. They don't really sell you the sitting on a plane for 3 hours. So the first thing in our equation is a destination. It's absolutely essential in my mind because otherwise, you're just gonna slow your whole process down and have this cycle of making decisions again and again rather than being able to move decisively towards some place. The second thing in our equation is a why, and this one I think is really, really fundamental when we think about resolutions as to why they don't work. Resolutions are often quite impersonal. They're based on society's expectations a lot of the time, and so I think having a really clear why is so important for genuinely creating change over any period of time. you've now got your destination in mind, but the why is what's going to power your train along the tracks, and make sure you keep showing up continually to move in that direction. So if you're the sort of person that continually sets goals, they might have a really clear metric and they might have this clear sense of a destination in mind for when you've completed your goal. But if you're the sort of person that sets a goal and then gives up on it within 2 or 3 weeks, my theory is that your why is the thing that's lacking here. So if that's you, then I really encourage you to think about why you're doing it in the first place. Make it a destination that means something to you, not just something that looks good on paper or sounds good. Very closely tied into this is the next part of our equation, and that is the feeling attached to your why. And here I think it's important to distinguish between approach motivation and avoidance motivation. Approach motivation is when you're motivated by a reward, by a desirable outcome that's going to happen as a result of you doing this thing. Whereas avoidance motivation is when you're motivated by something you don't want to happen and you're trying to act in a way that's going to avoid that happening. I think both have an important role. They're also known as like carrot and stick motivation. But when you're setting goals that are going to create a lasting identity shift, I think that approach motivation can be really powerful here. And the way that I can tell whether my goal is something that I'm using approach motivation for versus avoidance is if I'm really connected to this feeling of being excited, of being inspired by something. When I'm really feeling quite attached to that identity that I'm going to be creating as a result of achieving my goal, that's when I consistently show up and when I feel like I'm actually, motivated to do it and inspired to do it. And it just becomes a lot easier. This is the sort of easy mode versus hard mode. If you feel really pulled towards something, it's just going to be so much easier to genuinely create that meaningful shift. So in our identity equation, we have destination plus why times feeling, because I feel like these are quite intertwined and they're something that is a bit of a multiplier. If you have a stronger why and a stronger feeling attached, that is sort of a feedback within itself. But the next part of our equation is tangible action. This is where the sort of common advice that you hear from productivity YouTubers and people in the self-improvement space, they all talk about systems, and this is where that really comes into its own, because systems are what's going to help you create this tangible action over time. It's a power of tangible action, and obviously this is something that isn't just a one and done thing. The action needs to happen over a course of a week or a month or a year, etc., however long your goal is spanning across. And if you can make your tangible actions as small chunks as possible, I think that makes it a lot easier to show up because you're only dealing with a small chunk at a time. So you could ask yourself, what is the next best step here? What is the next move I need to make in order to move along the tracks? And you can think about the action as the different stops along your train line. If you're starting in London, for example, and you're going to Nottingham on your train, the stops are going to be places like, Luton and Leicester along the way. And like I said, if you can make those stops as small as possible to help you create those small bursts as you go along, I feel like that is where you can create change most easily. And so with this train analogy and the identity equation, we end up with a goal that really matters to us and is something that is going to really propel us in a direction that we want to move in. And I just think that is such a more helpful way to set up our goals than thinking about them in terms of society's expectations and sort of quite vague resolutions. There's one final piece that I think is important to touch on, and it's something I've expanded on in this video, which is all about the 1% rule and the sort of missing link in the 1% rule that will help to make it actually work. And that is celebrating your progress along the way. It's not necessarily the easiest part of this process, and I think something that I fall into the trap of a lot of the time is just continually moving forwards and never feeling like I've reached sort of the completion point. And I think that this is a really, really key part of it, because if you never celebrate your progress and you never acknowledge when you've leveled up or hit the milestone that you were setting out to, it means that you're always sort of approaching it from a place of lack rather than a place of enoughness and fulfillment and abundance. So while it can be easy to just skip over the celebration and the part where you're giving yourself a pat on the back for what you've achieved, it is a really, really key part of the puzzle. So if you want to hear more about that, then go and check out this video, which is the 1% rule video. The last thing that I want to talk about is the 90-day framework. I have spoken about this in several other videos, and if you want to see my current 90-day goals, my 3 goals for this season of spring, then you can check out this video here. But for me, 90 days is the perfect length of time in which to create genuine change. You have enough time to adapt and to pivot and to see the results compound, but it's also not so long that you start to get disconnected from it. You can really sort of focus in on that 3 months, those 90 days. Last thing I forgot to mention, I have a free downloadable 90-day goals template if you want to set yourself some 90-day goals for the season and use the motivation from this video to do that. So go download the PDF in the description. So that is my sort of complete framework for how I think about and approach goal setting. I really hope it's been helpful. If you enjoyed this video, then I would love it if you subscribed, especially if you've made it all the way to the end. It would be amazing if you could click that subscribe button and come back for future videos. But I will see you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.